We've got lots of colleagues here from all over the UK and further, and you're very welcome. We're in for a fast-packed evening of delight and poetry, and I've been invited to start not only to welcome you all, but to give you a sense of what's to come. So here's the plan for the evening. We've got Danny Cook on top text and Charlotte talking about CLP's Clipper Award and examples of practice from Emma and Stephanie, an update on Poetry by Heart by director Julie Blake, and Imogen on another example of practice, and some more top text from Rebecca Simpson-Hargreave, and then updates from our brilliant TRG leaders, OU UKLA, from Newark and from Dubai. And then we move on to the spotlight in the evening, which is the author in the spotlight with Laura Mutcher, interviewed by Rich Charlesworth, who has no voice tonight. So that'll make it interesting. And then we're closing with Kelly and Debbie before we all do a book wave. So if you haven't brought a book with you, try and snatch one from under the table or under the desk or on the shelf in order to share at that moment with everybody. So that's the plan for the evening. I'm the kind of timekeeper host, and I'm chasing people onwards. So I better chase myself onwards now. I decided today, or at least I was deciding two, and I read them both to Debbie, and she said, no, definitely this one. So I'm going for the definitely Debbie choice one. Which is actually one that some of you may know. I'm not reading the whole thing clearly, but an extract from this really rather brilliant, old but brilliantly gold, Love That Dog by Sharon Creech. I don't think I'm going to tell you too much, except to say that Benjamin Zephaniah says on the back cover, is it a diary? Is it a poetry? Is it a novel? Who cares? It's simply the most original book I've read in years, and I see it as my duty to tell the world that this book cannot be pigeonholed, which is, I think, a huge recommendation. And I'm just going to read a tiny bit from the beginning. The title of the chapter is Jack. Room 105, Miss Stechbury, September 13th. I don't want to, because boys don't write poetry. Girls do. September 21st. I tried. Can't do it. Brain's empty. September 27th. I don't understand the poem about the red wheelbarrow and the white chickens and why so much depends upon them. If there is a poem about the red wheelbarrow and the white chickens, then any words can be a poem. You just got to make short lines. October the 4th. Do you promise not to read it out loud? Do you promise not to put it on the board? Okay, then, here it is. If I don't like it, so much depends upon a blue car spattered with mud speeding down the road. October the 10th. What do you mean, why does so much depend upon a blue car? You didn't say before that I had to tell why. The wheelbarrow guy didn't tell why. October the 17th. What was up with that Snowy Woods poem you read today? And why doesn't the person just keep going if he's got so many miles to go before he sleeps? And why do I have to tell more about the blue car spattered with mud speeding down the road? I don't want to write about that blue car that had miles to go before it slept. So many miles to go in such a hurry. And Love That Dog carries on in that style. As a narrative verse, I simply adore narrative verse. It speaks volumes to me. It's a short and easy, brilliantly exciting way of getting into the narrative, but also to experience the poetry on the journey. If you don't know it, I hugely recommend it. It's almost more for teachers than it is for young people, but young people that I've taught have really enjoyed it too. Okay, just a quick research update, or just wanted to say then some more not first novels that I simply adore. And the one in the middle was the one that Debbie and I debated about whether I would read from. And I've chosen not to, but if you like a really emotional first novel, then go for The Tree That Sang to Me by Serena Malloy, and some other brilliant recommendations there too. Over just a quick 2 slides on a research update. The National Literacy Trust, Bonafide et al., and the team there explored what children thought about poetry. And when they looked and listened to the voices of the young people in their big survey, 20,000 kids, they found that the key kind of markers were either linguistic, textual, or kind of rhetorical devices. To young people saying that poetry is all about language, poetry is all about texts, as it were, and using particular devices and rhyme. Or they said, poetry is all about imagination, expressing yourself freedom, the chance to say what you think, to share your dreams, to connect to what you wish to. Sadly, though, when they came to whether young people engage in it, they found that over 50% didn't in particular way. And there was a decline in older children engaging with poetry. And the main reasons they gave was because it's too boring and the topics aren't anything to do with I'm interested in. Which I'm sure many people tonight will fight about and debate, but let's at least recognise young people are not always keen, though so many are. And girls and those on free school meals were more likely to find it more engaging. But 48% are consuming or creating poetry, according to this survey, and many who do engage report positive well-being, and they're motivated to share their poetry. I found that really exciting. They're motivated to share it with others in order to inspire their mates or other adults, to help themselves feel better. I think young Jack is helping himself feel better in this text and does to help others feel better and to make change. And those who perform it find it's a really powerful tool for creativity and self-expression. So just a quick research update before we move on. One piece of information to share that a new National Poetry Centre is being established by our Poet Laureate in Leeds for adults really, but for the wide range of us all. And they've got a survey going on about what anybody would want in a poetry centre in Leeds. And Kelly is popping that in the chat line alongside other information blogs that have been written in relation to this. So do look. But for now, I'm passing over to Danny, who's going to share her top texts. Danny's the Ilsham DfE National English Hub lead, and I know she's got some Christmas texts to share with us.
Hi everyone. Right, firstly up, I've got a couple of minutes, is "'Tis the Season." It's a beautiful lift the flap advent calendar full of Christmas poems on each day. And there's a couple of my favourites here. And we have on number day 22, we have Street Lights by Coral Rumble, and day 24, a beautiful poem, What Christmas is For. Christmas is a time for gifts, for giving and forgetting. Christmas is a time for peace, forgiving and forgetting, by Philip Wardell on there. It's beautiful at Constantina's out, so you can put it along your windowsill. Right, up on to the next one. You'll be aware of the classic "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." This version has beautiful diversity pictures throughout it. It's by Mr. Boddington's studio. As we look at here, just share kind of some of the illustrations that are in this. This is a must-have poem to read to all children, and once you see this copy, and particularly in the hardback, then you will definitely want to make sure that you're sharing that with your children. Finally, quickly, a newly published poem for every day of Christmas, and this was edited recently. There's a couple of great texts in here. You know, there's old and gold, there's new and bold, there's ones that we can share with lots of people, children to read along and share. And we have here Brian Bilson's here, one in the shape of a Christmas tree, his Needles poem. And finally, another one I just found here that's really fun is the Computer's First Christmas Card by
Great.
Edwin Morgan. So
Brilliant Edwin Morgan one that must be shared everywhere. Now we're introducing Charlotte Hacking, who's Learning and Programme Director at CLPE, and she's going to talk to us about the Clipper Award. Over to you, Charlotte.
I'm going to be very quick because I don't want Teresa to cut me off. So CLP is the National Poetry Centre for primary schools. We have a poetry library in London, and we run the only award for published children's poetry, the Clipper. Here you can see last year's winner, Matt Goodfellow. And the scheme that runs alongside it is a school's shadowing scheme to get children involved with the poems. If we can have the next slide. Thank you, Teresa. We've got lots to offer as part of the Poetry Centre. There's poetry research, and if Teresa keeps clicking on, you'll also find poetry training. Somebody said in the chat earlier that poetry was their weak point. There's also a range of poetry books on offer if you want more recommendations for things beyond the books that are being held up today. And we've also got, if you keep clicking, Teresa, thank you, teaching plans for poetry. So if you're feeling nervous about teaching poetry in the classroom, go and find some of those there. And the last thing on that slide, Teresa, thank you, is videos of poets performing poetry so that you can see and hear a wide range of poets and poetry. But on the next slide is what I'm really here to talk to about today, which is the Clipper Shadowing Scheme. And this gives children a unique opportunity to get invested in poetry. Oracy is big on the cards at the minute, and the shadowing scheme is all about performing poetry out loud. So all you have to do to enter is to film your children performing one of the poems from any of the books that get shortlisted for the CLP Poetry Award. If they win, like Quincy did here, you get the chance to actually look at joining us for the award show on the stage of the National Theatre in London. They get poetry workshops with the performance team at the National Theatre, and like Quincy here, you get to perform live alongside the shortlisted poets on stage. There's lots of videos of kids performing poems if you want to see what that looks like. It's really easy to get involved, and if we look at the next slide, all you have to do is to go to the CLP website. The shadowing scheme officially launches in May, but you can sign up to be involved now. All you have to do is go to the poetry page on the CLP website, and you'll see Clipper, the CLP Poetry Award, and you'll find a link there to sign up. And as I said, all of the winning schools will perform live on stage at the National Theatre. They'll meet the shortlisted poets, as well as receiving signed illustrations from Chris Riddell, one of our patrons, who live illustrates the ceremony as well. And lovely comments from Barbara in the chat as well. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. That's really fabulous. And it's an excellent award and well worth getting involved in. So now I'm passing over to Debbie and to Emma and to Steph, who are going to share a little bit about some of the new practice that they've developed through the Reading Schools programme. So over to Deb.
Yeah, so just before we hear from some of our participants in the Reading Schools programme, just wanted to let everyone know, if you don't know about our programme, it's been running for a considerable amount of time, but it's a strategic piece of work for you as a whole school to come to. It's been running since 2017, and we've got over 400 graduate schools, which I think is on the next slide, Teresa. Primary schools, but now Key Stage 3 settings and a Year 2 programme, which is available for you to work with. And the evidence is there that it has impact. You can see on over the top here, the evidence of impact around staff knowledge, but also on their practice, as well as impact onto their pupils in terms of attainment and their attitudes to reading. But now we're going to hear from one of our graduates from the Reading Schools programme, and we're going to hear from Emma Thompson-Nutter, who's going to share some of the practice where she's been working with her staff on developing their knowledge of poetry. So Emma, hopefully the IT is working for you.
Yeah, hopefully. Hi, good evening, everyone. So next slide, please, Teresa. Our aim was to build, widen our staff knowledge of contemporary poetry. And the reasons were for this: at the start of our project, we did a survey and only 24% of our teachers could name 3 poets. So it's no surprise when we surveyed our children, they also struggled to recall poets. Obviously, what we know is from the research, if teachers are knowledgeable, then children will be knowledgeable. If teachers love reading poetry, then often children will love reading poetry. So this made it even more important that we took some action around this. So I'm just going to talk through our actions. So what we did is we built in a weekly staff poetry recommendation into our inset meetings, and teachers then shared these in class the following day. We had a poet come and visit in our school. You can see the picture on the slide as well. And he really got the children performing poetry, which was totally new to our children, and they really enjoyed it. We had a poetry theme for World Book Day, and included within that, the children also were writing poems. We introduced an Innovate Writing unit into each year group. And again, this really got the children playing with language and writing in a way that they had never written before as well. We also delivered staff CPD in an inset meeting. We asked staff to bring the poetry books that they currently had in their classrooms, and we sent them on a poetry treasure hunt, researching in those books, looking for poems of different themes, and we also gave them time to reflect on their own poetry timelines. But staff still felt like we didn't have enough poetry books for them to build their own repertoires or the children's. So what we decided to do was have a battle of the poets, and each class were given a poet to research, and they learnt to perform some of their poems. And each class in a key stage assembly performed some poems, and the children then voted for their favourite performances alongside some quite elaborately dressed teachers. And they went to Waterstones, they won some money, and we were really pleased to see that they bought lots of poetry books at Waterstones afterwards. And those books are still being shared around school now. So collectively, the impact
Emma, you got 30 seconds.
Sorry, the impact of these actions were that now 93% of our teachers can name 3 poets. And 100% of our teachers can name 3 poets, and 93% can name 5 or more poets. And we're definitely seeing the children performing poetry and reading lots more poetry in their social reading times.
Right. Thank you so much. It's so much happened across a rich year, and it's hard to convey it in 2 minutes, I know, but super work. Over to Steph, who's curriculum advisor for English in South Gloucestershire and an ex-member of the RfP team, who's going to share some of the work she did with the Year 2 strengthening and sustaining cohort.
Yeah, exactly that. So last year I was working with a group of the English leaders on the 2nd year and beyond Open University RfP programme, also known as Strengthening and Sustaining. The English leaders on this course wanted ideas for a PDM to help their teachers jump into poetry. I'm going to share that staff meeting plan now, updated with a wintry theme for December, just in case you're looking for a festive CPD to go with your mince pies before the holiday. Before the staff meeting, ask 1 or 2 of your RfP allies to help you by bringing along a wintry poem to share. Try and a Tree by Kate Wakeling, or Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Ask everyone else to bring a wintry Christmas book that they like to read to children at this time of year. Start the staff meeting by reading aloud the poems you've brought to set the mood. Then give your colleagues a wintry poetry quest. They can use the poetry books you've gathered from bookshelves and libraries. These needn't be dedicated winter anthologies. All sorts of collections will have winter poems in them. Use iPads or QR codes to access websites such as the Poetry by Heart Festive Showcase, Children's Poetry Summit, Children's Poetry Archive, and CLPE. Focus colleagues' search with some criteria. Find a wintry poem that makes you smile. Find a poem that doesn't rhyme. Find a poem that links to the book you've brought. Colleagues only need to find 2 or 3 poems each, but they will need to read more than that to narrow down to their favourites. After 20 minutes, invite colleagues to choose one of their poems. Now it's time to exchange verses. Colleagues should read a poem or part of a poem to a friend and listen to a friend's choice in return. They might even swap poems. Find another partner and repeat. Read the same or a different choice. Move around the room and listen and read aloud. Remind colleagues that poems are meant to be spoken out loud, and it takes a little rehearsal. Show how you might prepare a reading by text marking. Ask teachers to pair up, choose a poem from their joint collections, and prepare a short performance. Enjoy your impromptu recital as pairs share their performances with the whole group. Challenge your colleagues to share 3 wintry poems with their classes before the end of term. Then enjoy your mince pies.
Thank you, Steph. Now we're turning over to Dr. Julie Blake, who created Poetry by Heart many years ago now and has been brilliantly leading it. So over to Julie to tell us all about that.
Thanks, Teresa. And the nutshells are all on the screen, but I'm going to rattle through it. Poetry by Heart is 2 things. It's a national poetry speaking competition for schools in England, and it's a website for teaching and learning about poetry. At heart, it's about reading poetry for pleasure by choosing it, learning it, and speaking it aloud for others to enjoy too. And everything we do is free for schools. On the website, you can explore our different collections of poems, including in December, a fun festive showcase of poems that I've already dropped the link into. You can sign up for our free poem of the week, which is an email with a link to a poem, an activity to lift it off the page, and now a word of the week to help encourage a love of language. In the competition, pupils in key stages 2 to 5 choose poems that speak to them. They learn them by heart, practice them, and perform them in school. Last year, more than 110,000 pupils took on the challenge. Schools enter the national competition with the video poem performances, and then out of the many thousands of videos that we get submitted, judges select 100 national finalists representing every region in England to come and perform at Shakespeare's Globe in London, and that's all paid for. It's a competition, but it's every bit as much a celebration of young people, poetry and reading. And by the way, there's a competition for all school staff too. Poetry by Heart's a thriving and diverse community of schools in every county, north and south, primary, secondary and post-16, special schools, PRUs and schools in very underserved communities. To help light the poetry fire, wherever you are, we send a free resource pack including a poem a month calendar and poem booklet, which I'm now going to model if my thing, it's not going to work, a poem a month calendar and poem booklet and a set of classroom poetry posters. The competition entry deadline is the 4th of April, so there's still plenty of time to sign up, get your lovely pack, you still can't see it, problem of using a background, and get started.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. And do encourage everybody to take part in all the things we're offering. There's too much tonight to take part in, but all of it worth it. And now we're turning over to an example of classroom practice from Imogen Maud, who's from Caldecott Primary School in Abington and has always had a passion for poetry as far as I understand. Over to you, Imogen.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so thanks. I thought I would just talk you through a little bit about my example of practice. If you could go to the next slide, Teresa, please. So these are absolutely not all my ideas by any means. A lot of them come from other people, from teachers in my school, but also from CLPE. And I just thought I would pull out the things that my school have been doing over the last kind of 3 years to help really build a love of poetry from early years right up to year 6 and including staff, and think practical things that might be useful to you. So we've really gone on a 4-pronged approach, appreciating, reading, writing, and performing poetry. And so I won't talk through all these ideas, but you can contact me if you want to know more about something. But firstly, we have a poem of the day in classes or in assembly. It might be a teacher reading, a pupil reading, and we use the CLP poetry videos that Charlotte was talking about earlier, which are really, really helpful for pupils to see poets reading their own work in their accents, dialects, representation across the school of poetry is really important. We have invested in having lots of enticing poetry books available for the children to read and borrow in the library, in classrooms, even in after school club. We have a poetry basket, which they can help themselves to, and they're really popular. We get to know lots of poets, including things like poetry treasure hunts and inviting poets in and, all sorts of things so that children can find a poet they can relate to. Every class has a poetry working wall where we put post-it notes of things the children have enjoyed. Sometimes children write poems and they go on the working wall, but it's very flexible. It's not a sort of high maintenance display. It's changing all the time. So I definitely recommend that. We have done the Clipper and Poetry by Heart for the last couple of years. We love both of them. We think it's really empowering for our children to perform. If you go to the and watch the videos of the children, at the Globe and doing the Clipper on the National Theatre, they are so inspirational. And our children aren't quite there yet, although they love poetry. They're not quite there with their performance. So we are starting in January a performance poetry club, which will be something new for our school for years 5 and 6, just to develop those skills and think about what makes a good performance of poetry, learn from children in other schools. And lastly, just lots and lots of rhythm and rhyme games of playing with language in a fun way across the school, across the curriculum. There's so much done with rhythm and rhyme in early years, and then it can taper off as you go up through the school. So, 5 minutes of clapping games and songs and things after lunch, even in year 6, it really lightens the mood, and it creates a really nice atmosphere, and children get that intrinsic sort of understanding of rhythm. And yeah, lastly, I was just going to say, make poetry fun. That's been our main message.
It's been very clear throughout your presentation, Imogen. Thank you. 3 minutes packed with information and power. I'm handing over, because I'm timekeeper tonight, no rudeness meant, to Rebecca Simpson-Hargreaves, who's a senior lecturer in education in Manchester, who's got a passion for poetry too.
Thank you, and hi everybody. So I have chosen the theme for tonight to be small victories, because as much fun as Christmas can be, it can also be at this time of year where children feel pressured with heavy expectations around enjoyment, and changes of routine can really knock them off balance. So I feel that poetry is the perfect antidote for this, and the poetry should focus on the everyday small things that really bring us joy. My first top text is the book of Not Entirely Useless Advice by A.F. Harold, illustrated by Minnie Gray. From the most toast about someone who's spectacularly skillful eating toast, to the poem Silences, which relishes in the beauty of the quiet times, like the snow before it's trodden on, or the moon as it freshly rises. There's even a poem about puddings. The Passing On of Shells is my second one, by Simon Lamb. It's collection of 50-word poems, from Welcome Winter, talking about crinkly leaves, to a hip-hop dancing grandma, to the wonderfully joyous Golden Retrieval, all about a dog that is desperate to play ball. And my final one is Bookside Down by Joanne Lindbergh. It is a relatively golden oldie, only 10 years old, but it includes one of my favourite poems that has stayed with me ever since I first read it. The Potatoes My Dad Cooks is a glorious poem about the humble potato. And when reading it aloud, you can see them and you want to taste them so much. It's also a poem that's included in the Poetry by Heart competition collection and is included on the CLP website along with a lesson plan. And I shall leave you with a couple of lines to tempt you. Let me now praise the potatoes my dad cooks, for truly they are epic. For they come from the oven smelling so sweet, their smell delights my nostrils. And hopefully it'll tempt you to go and have a read.
I'm definitely going to enjoy that one. I don't know enough about potato poems. Don't think I've never encountered one before. Thank you so much. We're moving on now at speed to Catherine and Sally, who are from the Donald Bailey Academy and who are Newark TRG leaders and have got a lot to share with us. So over to you two.
Hi, a big welcome from Newark TRG. So we're here to share what our group are focusing on and what difference has already been made from the emergence examples of practice. So this slide shows the choices made by our teachers. As you can see, only 4 areas of the teachers as readers research have been the main focus. However, all attendees had a desire to improve their pedagogy. What many teachers found was that their focus actually fell into lots of categories and they've just assigned it to one of them. And actually, our teachers are sharing their text at staff meetings and in assemblies. And so therefore, they are covering the missing area of teachers who read and readers who teach. What has become really clear from the start of our TRG is that teachers are very aware of the ability of their readers, how to pass a test. They are not aware of their reading identities. And this is something that they are now focused on learning a lot more about, which has been really great to see.
Our group are now measuring the impact of the new ideas. They're implementing that through chat, surveys and observation. A couple of innovative ideas that Sally and I absolutely love have come from the schools working to build a community of readers. First Chapter Friday has been adopted by one of our schools. Basically on a Friday morning, every teacher in the school selects from a genre and selects a story that they then share the first chapter with the children in the hope to entice them into picking up something different. And another one is a weekly podcast that a school are doing with Year 6. The children created their own theme tune using AI and interviewed up to 3 children from across the school every week and then post the results on Class Dojo for families to see. The teachers viewed excitement across the school, but also an example of intrinsic motivation in the form of improved attendance. Not a child from the original focus group of those children who can read but choose not to, but a child that was missing from education last year and is now achieving 100% attendance because of their desire to take part. Sally and I are delighted that so many TRG members have grasped the concept of the need to build intrinsic motivation, and they're already talking about making reading itself the reward for positive behaviour.
We all share a similar purpose on our TRG, the knowledge that we can use reading for pleasure to improve the life chances of children. And certainly in our own school, we've recently gained evidence that we're actually bucking the national trends for reading enjoyment.
Brilliant, Catherine and Sally. I got so excited when you were talking about the podcast, my finger clicked and I moved you on. That was not deliberate. It was not my problem. Thank you so much. Now I'm handing over to Mary Rose Grieve, who's from the International School in Dubai, who's been a teacher reading group leader there for a long time, Mary. So over to you. Great.
Yes. Hello. Hi everyone. So this is now my seventh year of running TRG. We started very small, and now this year, I mean, there's only so many photographs you can take of teachers sitting around a table, but there they all are. This is our biggest year, my biggest year so far. We've got it. I think I've got about 20 schools represented in our TRG, and actually what I've done this time around, we had one meeting where everyone came together, and now I've been splitting them and doing one in person and one online, just because the traffic, we talk about traffic in Dubai like everyone talks about weather in the UK. The traffic is so bad that nobody can get through, so it's just worked out really nicely. But it's really been fantastic this year. We've had 2 meetings so far, the initial one, and most people are focusing on their own knowledge of children's literature. We're sponsored by an amazing independent bookshop in Dubai, children's bookshop. So he's very kind, and I go around the warehouse and just keep throwing books into a box. And every year he says, "You've got too many." And I said, no, I'm sure it's all right. Don't worry, it'll be fine. So that is a selection of them. So people have been taking those and reading them with their children. What was, I think, really interesting was that one teacher from a school said, "We do all of these things that are about reading for pleasure. We do all of this. We have bookniks, we have reading rivers, we do reading surveys. But what I've realised," she said, "since coming to these 2 meetings is that the impact is only made, the difference only really happens when I, as the teacher, live it and understand why I'm doing it and can see and have a purpose for it." So I've really spent a lot of time talking about how you need to have some fidelity to the research and to really plan what you're doing with focus, because it's so easy to grab at lots of ideas and think it's fun, but maintaining a purpose is just really important. So really excitingly, just yesterday, I heard from the Literature Festival in Dubai. They called me up yesterday and said, "Would you like an author to come and visit your teacher's reading group?" So we've got Elle McNichol coming in January just to talk to us, which is amazing.
Look at Catherine and Sally, they look beyond jealous.
I know, I feel
Wonderful.
so lucky. We're really lucky because we're really well supported. Now that we've been going for so long, the Literature Foundation really are supportive, and I hope that Teresa will be coming for the Reading for Pleasure conference that they're organising later on. So things are moving on, and we're having it's exciting. So yeah, it's a good year.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary Rose, and lovely to hear about it, and good on you for keeping going. Our next item is a young man, 17, 18, we're not sure exactly his age, and he is a member of the school where a new teacher reading group leader from Abu Dhabi, Nikki, has started this year, and she was inviting her class to write about a poem about objects in their bag, and what Ethan chose to write about, what's inside our bags, ended up being more about reading and reading for pleasure than almost anything else. So here's his poem, and we're going to invite him to speak to us now. Do listen in.
It's called Symbolize. Enjoy. Bio, moral, business. All my books stack up high, but there's one at the top that stands out to my eye. My escape, my joy, my unrivaled pleasure. I look back down at the others, knowing they do not measure. They do not measure to how this one book makes me feel. Pure happiness and joy. It makes life feel so real. It's fascinating how the same material can have such a drastic effect. or made out of paper, but there's only one I'm willing to accept. It's interesting, really. Humans are more like books than we think. Sometimes you have to stand there and blink to realize what I'm trying to say. Some people are like bio. They will happily sit there and drain your energy all day. Some are like business, tedious and long. However, there is one I could talk to all day long. They are like my book. They somehow remove all my pressure. They allow me to turn my mind off and enjoy my leisure. We could talk for hours on end, and I would never complain, because the happiness they contain could simply never be used in vain. Maybe our bags are more of a mirror than we realise, a little glimpse into each other's lives, each book having a meaning none of us could ever theorise. Maybe if we opened our eyes, we could finalise that we are not too far away from what our bags contain inside, each little thing there to symbolise different parts of everyone's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. How lovely to hear his own voice. And she shared it with us within the RfP community, and we thought it would be lovely to share with you. Interesting how his first draft, which we were sent, was obviously shaped up by his final one, which he voiced with something sometimes slightly different. Anyway, I'm handing over now to Rich Charlesworth, who's going to be introducing us to Laura Much, who we're so delighted to have. She replied to Debbie in uppercase when she said she'd like to come. Debbie invited her, and her reply was returned in uppercase, sent on to me. So, Laura, over to you, and Rich, we're delighted you're here.
So before I start, obviously apologise for my illness. I'm a little bit croaky, but yeah, the jazzy jackets as a response to Laura. She's you'll get to know her throughout these next 20 minutes, but she's very sparkly, very upbeat. But I think the first thing I'll do before I sort of hand over to her and ask her for a few questions is just very briefly sort of say how we first met, which was on the Clipper stage, and Laura was performing from this book, Being Me. And it's this amazing poem, sort of full of energy, all about an orchestra. Lots of you may know it already. But I think having got to know Laura over the last couple of years now, I can see this like more quiet and introspective poems that come out from her. And I hope from this discussion, you'll get to see the sort of multifaceted individual that she is. So I think it's been great getting to know you, Laura, but I think the first bit is to maybe start with your most recent poem, which I believe is a Guinness World Record breaking attempt. Can you tell us a bit more? How's it going?
Yeah, well, I've got a PowerPoint because there's no way I can tell you this without pictures. Can you see this?
All good.
Let me, I have to start it. Hold on. Slideshow, play from start. Right. So I've had this idea that I should try and break a Guinness World Record for world's largest poetry lesson. I could have done longest poetry lesson, and then I wouldn't have had to pay Guinness fees of £30,000. But I wanted to make children Guinness World Record breakers. So I enlisted 5 charities, including the CLP and National Poetry Day and many others. And then got 270,000 sign-ups. This is the map. Loads of countries around the world. This is an analysis ahead of it, like thousands of kids, hundreds of schools sent in their ideas in response to teaching resources about what they thought counts. This is a map of what they think. And for me, because I do a lot of research around child mental health, having friends, family, people as large was vital. Went on Newsround, BBC Breakfast, said the word fart, went viral. That's my fart face, 6 newspapers. And this is my life. This is your school, Rich. Avonmore, complete. You've got your own little file. This is all your evidence. And this, oh, come on, why are you not working? This is the spreadsheet of doom. That's what Charlotte Hacking calls it. And I think it's an appropriate name. So for the last 2 months, having spent 8 months working full time on this, I now got every line as a different school. And this is what I do. I just go through this. Today, this week, I've been calling schools. I spoke to Sweden. Where's your evidence? Anyway, I think we've got enough evidence. That's how enjoyable it's been. I think we've got enough evidence for 40,000 kids at the moment. 100 to 150,000 kids came. We co-wrote a poem about what they think counts, which I think is a really powerful poem. And it's on the Children's Poetry Archive, if you want to read it. I think it's quite thought-provoking. And I'm never doing this again. Why do I think that was a good idea?
It was beautiful to witness, and I think the amount of technology involved, the children were participating in polls, there was all sorts of different animals, names, and it was a really interesting sort of moment for them to be involved with, and to see the kind of ideation and where ideas come from, and how sort of you form your poems as well. I think sort of leading from that, before we hear a few poems from you, I was quite interested, I know this already, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into poetry, and was there a particular poem that resonated with you?
Yes, I used to be a lawyer at a corporate law firm where I earned loads and loads of money. And I used to flounce around with designer handbags, getting taxis home at 10 p.m. because that's what they do when you work late. And then one day I was hit by a car when I was walking across the street in Islington, where I lived at the time. And a taxi came around the corner, sped, hit me, passenger got out, I'm in the middle of the floor, everyone's staring, people have called an ambulance, and the passenger of the car gets out and goes, do you mind if I keep going? I'm late for my flight. And then all the Islingtonians are like, you can't go. Anyway, I was then left bedbound for 2 years, and no one knew what was wrong with me. My law firm sent me to see psychiatrists because they thought I was making stuff up. I was told that I might have a brain tumor, and then I was told I might need a pacemaker. And eventually, after 2 years, I finally got a diagnosis after I had cardiac arrest in hospital. And in that time, it basically impacted my nervous system, which influences sleep. So I was not sleeping at regular times. So I'd often be awake at night, which is really lonely. And I started writing poems, and the poems came out as weirdly quite uplifting poems for children. And so my now husband, then boyfriend, sent me to a poetry course, and that's how it started. And one thing I want to tell you is I read a poem every day for 2 years, and this is the poem. It's a stanza of a poem, New Every Morning by Susan Coolidge, which is the pen name. Every day is a fresh beginning. Listen, my soul, to the glad refrain, and spite of old sorrow and older sinning, and puzzles forecasted and possible pain, take heart with the day and begin again. And what it was like was this person that is dead was like, it's okay. I know this is shit, but it's going to get better, one day at a time. And every day, this person told me that in the form of a poem. And so I have literally lived the power of poetry. And then I also lived it in a different way, because after I had cardiac arrest, I was like, I don't know what to do. What I'll do is go to a poetry workshop at the National Gallery, which I highly recommend if you're ever hit by a car and or have cardiac arrest. And the exercise was to write a poem in front of a painting. And the poem I wrote was The Land of Blue, which has been really widely reprinted. And I don't think I really understood how sad I was about it until I wrote the poem. And there was a therapist on the workshop, and he came up to me afterwards. He went, really liked your poems. I was like, thanks. I was hit by cardiac arrest on Monday. And he went, do you think you processed that? And I was like, yeah, in a week. But I think I was processing it through poetry. So this is The Land of Blue. And I wonder if I can share my screen, because I've got a nice illustrated version for you to see. Here it is.
If not, I can always hold up.
Okay, The Land of Blue. Across the valley, it waits for you, a place they call the Land of Blue. It's far and near, it's strange yet known. And in this land, you'll feel alone. You might feel tears roll down your cheek. You might feel wobbly, weary, weak. I know this won't sound fun to you. It's not. This is the Land of Blue. It's blue, not gold or tangerine. It's dark, not light, not bright or clean. It's blue. And when you leave, you'll see the crackly branches of the tree, the golden skies, the purring cat, the piercing eyes, the feathered hat, and all the other things that come when you escape from feeling glum. Across the valley, it waits for you, a place they call the Land of Blue. And going there will help you know how others feel when they feel low.
I can already read some of the comments. Yeah.
I'm not going to read them because I'll get distracted.
Afterwards.
Right. Okay.
That was brilliant. And I think like I see sort of so many different sides of you within your poems, and I know that the amount of research that goes into them, and I know we've got hopefully a bit of time to talk about that right at the end, about the non-fiction and poetry. But I think knowing the audience full of teaching staff, librarians, and absolutely rammed of poetry enthusiasts, just a small sort of soapbox moment, shout as loud as you can about poetry. If you had that opportunity and you were kind of trying to get everyone on side and everyone shouting about poetry, what would you say and why? What kind of things?
I think I've done a lot of study of psychology. I'm part of a Cambridge research group on child mental health, done a foundation in psychotherapy. I think poetry acts as a code and a container for things that are very personal, intimate, difficult. I think it's really fun. I write fun poetry. I think fun is great, and I think fun is important. But I think often where the value really lies is to help students that may be perceived as reluctant or disengaged to access things that they might not have told anyone. And I think that there's so many aspects to that. I think because you're using fewer words, because there's so much white space, because it's often there's a form to it which weirdly acts as some sort of special code that makes it feel safe. I think because it's small, it can feel contained, and I think there's a massive value to it. Unfortunately, though, the research suggests that that value is not always like benefited from, because some people can find it intimidating or boring, as Fran's research at NLT showed, with boring and a big bold word, which made me slightly sad.
Yeah, there's I think there's a lot to be said, I think, for finding the right poem for the right child. And I think, yeah, like there's just with my class of year threes, it's you can find that right poem for the right person. I know Teresa will know one from this text really well, which I'll share later. But it was that one of those moments where I read a poem out loud and it affects people in different ways, and you can't really know that. And I guess for you as a poet, you send it out into the world, and how it reaches children, I guess through librarians, through teachers, is such an interesting part. My next kind of area is linked into where you've been, and I know recently it's branched out from just the British Isles, now into the island of Mauritius, and via the world with the Guinness. So when you're visiting schools, which I know you're amazing at, and sort of talking about the love and the craft of poetry, do you have a particular poem that you like to perform versus poems that you like to use in schools? And I was wondering if we've got time to maybe have one of those.
Yeah, I'm going to try and show you a poem.
They work on different ways. You were saying when we talked a bit earlier that certain poems lend themselves to be read aloud, others more as a workshop.
I'm going to share this one with you. There's another one that I like, but I'm really worried about time, and I don't want Teresa to tell me off, so I'm going to just really but can I just say the timing and the pacing of this is like ninja levels, and I feel like this is like BBC production primetime quality. Anyway, so I wrote this poem called Thought Machine, specifically to try and address metacognition, which is the principle of thinking about thinking. So if you can think about thinking, you're going to have a better life, basically. Because if you can think about the thought, I'm an idiot, then you can think, I'm having the thought, I'm an idiot, rather than buying into it and thinking, I am an idiot. So this was the idea behind the poem. I'm going to share, this is, hold on. This is what it looks like in the book. And this is a version that I wrote recently, co-wrote with 2 schools. So here we've got some examples of what they've come up with. You're a skibbity slay, Ohio Rizzler. You're slay, that's things they think when it's good. When it's bad, that was even worse than Jojo Siwa. That was even worse than Tottenham. I did something even worse than voting for Trump. And then things they do to make themselves feel better. Where are they? Troll kids on Roblox, get banned on Roblox, insult Arsenal, insult Tottenham, keep on dying to fall damage on Fortnite. But one thing I think is really important is they said that, I think of one thing I like about myself, I'm enough. But how wise is that? That's so profound. I am enough. How many of us, myself included, do things that are driven from a sense that we're not enough? Anyway, so here are some examples of co-writing this with students across the country. This is Nottingham. I'm not good enough. What is wrong with me? I want to go home. Doncaster, my heart's just fallen out of its storage. London, why do I exist? Die. On the subject of death, this comes up a lot. Children are like, why do I exist? Die. And sometimes teachers are like, but actually it's really good, if possible, to not stigmatize thoughts like that and just to kind of hold it and accept it, because it does come up a lot and it's not uncommon. I'm going to fail. This is Cheltenham. I'm going to fail and work minimum wage at a burger joint for the rest of my life. That was private school. Hong Kong, you are a disappointment to your school and family. So I think that, like, I like to co-write that one because and I'm not just teaching poetry, I'm teaching important mental health principles, but within the framework of poetry. And so I think what's quite useful about it is for students that wouldn't ordinarily go there, you're learning about the words, the organization of the words, and the importance of being emotional and honest. You're rearranging the words, you're saying them out loud, you're cutting, blah, blah, blah. But actually, you're also learning that everyone else has thoughts like this. You're not alone. Thoughts can help or harm. And then you learn about other people's coping mechanisms. So I often, like, if I'm performing, I'll do lols poems as well as serious. But then when it comes to co-writing, I try and delve. I also let them choose. And sometimes, we've co-written poems about death before, and children have cried, and I've been told by headmasters.
It is the effective nature of poetry. It's so, yeah. And I think we've talked about it a bit before, but finding the right poem for the right person. Before my voice completely goes and I'm doing Love Actually placards, I'm conscious of, we've got a bit of time to go through just at the very end, I think, a smidge maybe, Teresa, to talk about non-fiction. So I've been lucky enough, I've got quite a few of yours, so welcome to the table. But you do lots and lots of research, and I think that shows through lots of the poems that you do. And there's some in Dear Ugly Sisters, which I know we've sort of read and sort of discussed together. So I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about how maybe writing non-fiction poetry and how that differs maybe, and kind of, you've explored form a little, but I know the one that you're going to share has a sort of interesting form as well.
Yes, so I'm really into non-fiction. I write non-fiction for adults. Here's an example of how I think non-fiction in poetry form is great. So Fleming's Petri dish, he basically was a bit skanky and didn't clean up his Petri dishes, went on holiday, came back, realised that there was mould because he hadn't cleaned them up. And as you can see, this is the poem, but I'll show you the next one. This is the poem on top of his actual Petri dish. And you can see the white blob is the moulding, and you can see around it this area where the bacteria doesn't want to go, and then the bacteria is surrounding it. Now, I think that you can understand science, blah, blah, but when you see it like that, you're like, oh, I get it. And I think that concrete poetry or shape poetry can be really valuable in that way. That is my alarm to tell me that we've done 16 minutes and 30. Okay, so yeah, so this is a book that I'm working on. It's coming out like the year after next. It's using poetry and exploring animals that seem scary but aren't, or that are, but that are interesting, that we can learn from, whilst also like exploring fear and anxiety. So trying, basically, I often, I'm going to stop sharing. I often trying to use poetry and or a combination of poetry and prose to make things that I think are really important and can improve lives a bit more accessible. But I also do quite funny stuff. Actually, I'm going to share. I got permission. I got this today. And I emailed my publisher to say, can I share it? This picture book, which is coming out next year, we're not allowed to share this. So there's no mental health in this whatsoever. It's just funny. And actually, sometimes that's really important. Like, it's tiring trying to do mental health stuff all the time. And this has been really, really joyful to work on. So I think that's also relevant to the mental health side. Like, and for you as teachers, like, it's great to do, but you've got to pick your time. Like, if you're really knackered or unwell, or you've got something really big going on in your personal life, or you've just had a student have a meltdown to you, that is not the ideal time for you to delve into mental health poetry. It's not always the time. You've got to think about, like, what, don't do a poem about bereavement if you've just been bereaved, like, don't do a poem about divorce if you know that's happening in one of your students' lives and you're not sure if that's like the right time, I think poetry and mental health is brilliant, but I think also humour and lightness is vital as well.
It's why I think when I first went into this, like the words that you, Matt, and Liz all put together, there's that lovely is a full sort of gamut of emotions. I think that's pretty much everything that we had down to talk about. So unless there's any other questions, I know you have. We were going to talk a little bit, I think, about developmental pathways.
Can I do that? It's so important. It's the one thing I want to do. Do I have time?
You have 30 seconds.
God. Okay, all right. Hold on. So I've written this book for adults, taken 5 years, got paid £5 a day for it. It's about attachment theory, which you can't really understand childhood without understanding. And Bowlby, who is the founder of it, did this illustration, which I've reproduced here in excellent quality. And as you can see where I've put blue, helpful teacher. So basically, he thought that you could have a range of healthy pathways that are in green. But if you've got something that's not great in your personal life, like unstable home, for example, or your father leaves with no, just leaves, then you're kind of veering off. But Bowlby and all researchers in the attachment community think that teachers can essentially get kids back towards being on track. And I've got like little quotes here, but I don't know if I've got time. But essentially, like people that I interviewed for 4 years talked about how teachers changed their lives. So like lines are, it was the first time I'd had someone, her primary motivation was my emotional well-being. It was the first time I'd had that from someone that wasn't my age. She gave a shit when she didn't have to. This is someone that had 2 overdoses and had, a very abusive home life. And this is Elijah, again, another abusive home life. I was going through some pretty heavy stuff during that time. Without her, my teacher, my story would have been completely different. So I just wanted to say that, like, I think sometimes it's annoying. All of us could be doing jobs that pay us more, that have less work, and get the designer handbags. But I think what I want you to know is that with every micro moment of your time, you can change children's lives. And I think we all know that, but actually to know that there's science backing behind it, like that we have stories, life stories in this book that I've heard people telling me they wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for their teachers. I really want you to know that, like, you change people's lives. And I think that, of course, poetry is important for sure, but it's also about you creating a safe space in which to teach and explore poetry with your students.
Thank you, Laura Muka. That's just been absolutely fabulous. And thank you, Rich, for doing so. I'm going to move us on, but I don't know really what else to say. Kelly has said that you're the best person she'd like to take to a dinner party. So let's see if Kelly's inviting you to dinner next time round.
Yes, that question, top 5 people in history you'd invite to a dinner party. You're on top of my list, Laura, now. So there you go. Okay, I've got a few updates for you. First one, are you looking for ways to keep children reading over the winter months? Join the Winter Mini Reading Challenge. It runs from December to February. You can unlock badges and earn special certificates of achievement. Also, check out this free ebook collection of stories, illustrations, and features from over 80 UK writers. Children for Change inspires children to take action. What a fantastic Christmas present idea. The CLPE's latest Reflecting Realities report has now been published. It's a must-read highlighting ethnic representation within UK children's literature. And as we near the end of this calendar year, we wanted to remind you of the Read for Empathy collection 2024. There are so many amazing resources on the Empathy Lab website, so do check it out and find out about Empathy Lab Day on June 2025. We have another event coming up in February through the Centre for Literacy and Social Justice with Dr. Laura Shapiro and Professor Jessie Ricketts. So we're really excited to hear about their research around promoting reading across transition. And remember, all those events are free. Now, we have many UKLA members, United Kingdom Literacy Association, in the room tonight. So if you are a member, do join us for the half-termly book blether series. You can register for these through Eventbrite. And over to you, Debbie.
Thank you. And I'm just going to highlight very quickly World Book Day. You all know when it is, and we are still partnered with World Book Day and enjoy very much the relationship with them, bringing the research to the work that they're doing. But do have a look, because you can sign up now for whether you're a partner or a charity to work with them, or libraries to work with them. And then there's a briefing for teachers in January. So sign up for that. And then very close to my heart is the Spark Book Awards. You can sign up. There are the QR code should come up on the slide now, but that's one of the only book awards where the pupils get to decide. You might have seen our 12 books of Christmas that are currently on social media that we're releasing, and that could be a key strategy you use for developing your teacher's subject knowledge and your children's subject knowledge. So do sign up for the book awards. And finally, we are in Doncaster for, I sound like I'm doing a TV presenter's job now, don't I? We're in Doncaster for our spring conference, where we'll be at the Willows Primary School with Sophia Ahmed. So if you'd like to come and meet Sophia, but also hear about Choice and Voice, Honouring Readers' Rights, is our spring conference. So please do look out for that. On Teresa to finish off.
Just to say a great big thank you to everybody who's participated this evening, to all 86 folk who joined us tonight. It's been really fabulous. I think the stars of the show, though, have been Laura Muka and Rich Charlesworth. That was just so fascinating. I was sitting there going, what? I don't believe it. This is extraordinary. And people were kind of silenced in the chat line, as well as actively commenting and thanking you, Laura. So thank you very much, and Rich, but for everybody who's come, including all of you back at home.